You're on,
Nancy.
Nancy.
Good morning. Welcome to our online worship service of Kitsap Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. I invite you to follow along in the order of service. We will put a link to that in the chat. Whoever you are and wherever you have come from, and whatever your comfort with digital technology, for this hour, we here are one gathered congregation and all are welcome. My name is Nancy Slate. I currently am a member of the worship team and also serve on the finance committee. And I thought I might put a brief plug in for volunteerism. Even though we are not meeting in person, there are still many opportunities to be involved in the life of our fellowship. Our worship leader this morning is Reverend Bruce Bode, Minister Emeritus at the Quimper Unitarian Fellowship in Port Townsend. Bruce retired from the Quimper Church in 2018 after serving that congregation for 14 years. I'd like to welcome any visitors. Please introduce yourselves in our chat box. We welcome more interaction with all after our service during our Zoom coffee hour. The link for our coffee hour will go into the chat room also. You will need the password creed to be admitted to the coffee hour. If you're phoning in today, welcome. If you want to join the coffee hour by phone, the number to call is 1-253-215-8782. The meeting ID is 438-451-134, and the password is 8533-2070. Our announcements are on our webpage at www.kuuf.org and also in our weekly email newsletter, The Candle. We would like to start today by acknowledging that the land on which we all live is the Aboriginal territory of the Suquamish, the Sklallam, and the Skokomish people. They have lived in harmony with the lands and waterways along the Washington Coast Salish Sea for thousands of years. These tribes still live here, and they protect the land and waterways of their ancestors for future generations, as promised by the Point Elliott Treaty in 1855. Our musical call to worship is "Come, Come, Whoever You Are."
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of living, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come.
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper,
Greetings to you from my home study here in Port Townsend on this Sunday morning. It's good to be with you. As is the tradition in most Unitarian Universalist congregations, our services begin with the lighting of the flaming chalice, and I invite you to light your own chalice or candle at home, following the words for the lighting of our chalice, which are a prayer from the East Indian poet Rabindranath Tagore, the words of which will presently appear on the screen. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. Our opening hymn is We Would Be One, the lyrics of which will appear on the screen.
We would be one, as now we join in singing our hymn of love, to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other, to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow, a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which finds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with love and justice, strive to make us free.
Bruce, please turn on your speaker.
Please join me in our spoken affirmation. The words will appear on the screen. We gather as a caring community, seeking life's deeper meaning. We value diversity and affirm the worth of all living things. We strive to speak truth in love, to act for justice, to grow in spirit, and to care for the earth. We celebrate with open hearts and minds the creative power that sustains and transforms us. Now is the time for our morning offering. If you would like to donate electronically, please click on the PayPal Me link in the chat box. You may then email admin@KUUF to let us know if your donation is for 1, KUUF General Fund, or 2, the Minister's Discretionary Fund to help our members in need, or 3, our monthly charitable giving recipient. And for the month of July, that's the Bremerton Food Line. You may also send a check to the address on the screen. Please write in the memo line to which of the funds your offering should go. Let there be an offering to strengthen and to sustain our community, which is sacred to so many of us. Our gift of music is Prelude number 20 by Chopin, played by Brian Kinney.
Hello from Port Orchard. We're here today to read the story for all ages, and I have my volunteer,
Me!
my grandson Nathaniel. Thank you for helping me.
You're welcome.
Today's story is about having an idea and letting it grow.
Into an epic idea.
Let's read.
What do you do with an idea?
By Kobe Yamada.
One day I had an idea.
Where did it come from? Why is it here, I wondered.
What do you do with an idea?
At first, I didn't think much of it. It seemed kind of strange and fragile. I didn't know what to do with it.
So I just walked away from it. I acted like it didn't belong to me.
But it followed me.
And
I worried what other people would think, what other people would say about my idea.
I kept it to myself and hid it away and didn't talk about it.
I tried to act like everything was the same as it was before my idea showed up, but there was something magical about my idea. I had to admit.
I felt better and happier when it was around.
It wanted food.
It wanted to play.
Actually, it wanted a lot of attention.
It grew bigger and we became friends.
I showed it to other people, even though I was afraid of what they would say. I was afraid that if people saw it, they might laugh at it.
I was afraid they would think it was silly.
And many of them did. They said it was no good.
They said it was too weird.
They said it was a waste of time and that it would never become anything. And at first, I believed them.
I actually thought about giving up on my idea.
I almost listened to them. But then I realized, what do they really know?
This is my idea. I thought, No one knows it like I do.
And it's okay to be different and weird and maybe a little crazy. I decided to protect it, to care for it.
I fed it good food. I worked with it. I played with it.
But most of all, I gave it my attention.
My idea grew and grew.
And so did my love for it. I built a new house, one with an open roof where I could look up to the stars.
A place where it could be safe to dream.
I liked being with my idea. It made me feel more alive, like I could do anything.
It encouraged me to think big and then to think bigger.
It shared its secrets with me. It showed me how to turn things upside down because it said, it's good to have the ability to see things differently.
I couldn't imagine my life without it. Then one day something amazing happened.
My idea changed right before my very eyes. It spread its wings, it took flight, and burst into the sky.
I don't know how to describe it, but it went from being here to being everywhere.
It wasn't just a part of me anymore. It was now a part of everything. And then I realized what you do with an idea.
You changed the world.
I like that story.
It was an epic story.
Thank you for your help.
You're welcome.
We'll see you again soon.
Bye.
Bye.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Even when I'm home,
Even when I'm home, I'm gonna
let it shine.
even when I'm home,
I can dream on it.
I'm gonna let it shine. Even when I'm home, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
When I think of you,
When I think of you, I'm gonna let it shine. When I think of you, I'm gonna let it shine. When I think of you, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
this little light of mine,
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
let it shine,
Let it shine, let it shine.
Now is the time in the service for sharing of joys and sorrows. Though we are physically distanced from one another, our hearts and spirits remain connected. When shared together, our joys are amplified and our sorrows lessened. If you have a joy or sorrow to share, I invite you to put it in the chat. Please set your chat setting to be to all panelists and attendees. I will read them out loud. This is from Elaine Alve. She says, Patrick and I finally have my emotional support animal. I'm sorry, that was from Joey. Patrick and I are so joyfully introducing the newest member of our family, a healthy baby boy named Leo. And from Joey Witherspoon, my joy is finally I have my emotional support animal, I have the paperwork, and I'm looking for a dog right now. From Chris to all panelists, joy for my new Chalice circle. From Bonner, I have been heartbroken this past week after the news of the son-in-law of KUUF friend Alice Hansen's death. From the Sugimotos, a great joy that our son Thomas Takashi Sugimoto has moved home from Japan. From Terry Looney, Erin smiles even though we can only visit her through the backyard fence. That makes me smile. And from Bonner, his name was Justin Hale, or Halle. I think Bonner's comment was about the son-in-law of one of our members who had passed away. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. May you who shared this morning feel the love of this community surrounding you and holding you close. And for all of those whose joy or sorrow is too tender to share, our hearts are with you. May the spirit of life and love bring peace to all. Amen, and blessed be.
I've got my glasses up quite a bit. Hold on.
I'll just leave if it's better.
A part of what I see and feel happening in our country and around the world in broad outline in the last several weeks of these ongoing social protests is an affirmation or reaffirmation of the American dream, the American experiment, or what Unitarian Universalist theologian, the Reverend Dr. Forrest Church calls the American Creed, which I will be talking about in my sermon. This affirmation or reaffirmation is being led by some of those who have been the most shut out from the American dream through ongoing racial prejudice, America's original sin, but who nonetheless still have seen the dream and are pointing the way to it through anguished, angry, and yet to me, ultimately hopeful protests. As a way of introducing my sermon theme, I am going to read excerpts from two sources of very different backgrounds and experiences, each of which speaks of the American dream by way of protest, that is, by way of calling out our distance from the dream. I'm going to ask you to kindly pay close attention to these readings, each of which is fairly lengthy, They're really part of my sermon. These readings will take about 8 minutes to read, and my sermon, which will follow after we hear the song Let It Be, my sermon will be about 20 minutes in length. The first reading consists of excerpts from the classic poem Let America Be America, again written by the Black poet Langston Hughes. This poem was inspired by a train journey that Langston Hughes took through Depression-struck America in 1935. The poem, written in the non-inclusive gender language of the day, focuses on the idea of the American dream and how, for many, attaining freedom, equality, and happiness, which the dream encapsulates, is nigh unto impossible. And yet the dream might still be fulfilled. Let America Be America again, by Langston Hughes. Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plain seeking a home where he himself is free. America never was America to me. Let America be the dream the dreamers dreamed. Let it be that great, strong land of love where never kings connive nor tyrants scheme that any man be crushed by one above. It never was America to me. Oh, let my land be a land where liberty is crowned with no false patriotic wreath, but opportunity is real and life is free. Equality is in the air we breathe. There's never been equality for me nor freedom in this homeland of the free. Say, who are you that mumbles in the dark? And who are you that draws your veil across the stars? I am the poor white fooled and pushed apart. I am the Negro bearing slavery scars. I am the red man driven from the land. I am the immigrant clutching the hope I seek and finding only the same old stupid plan of dog eat dog, of mighty crush the weak. Yet I'm the one who dreamt our basic dream to build a homeland of the free. The free? Who said the free? Not me. Surely not me, the millions on relief today, the millions shot down when we strike, the millions who have nothing for our pay. For all the dreams we've dreamed and all the songs we've sung and all the hopes we've held and all the flags we've hung. The millions who have nothing for our pay except the dream that's almost dead today. Oh, let America be America again. The land that never has been yet, and yet must be. The land where every man is free, the land that's mine, the poor man's, Indians, Negroes, me, who made America, whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plow in the rain, must bring back our mighty dream again. Oh yes, I say it plain. America never was America to me. And yet I swear this oath, America will be. My second reading is a more recent protest, which no doubt most of you have heard about and perhaps some have read, a protest from several weeks ago and from an unlikely source, the Marine General James Mattis, who finally broke his silence with respect to the president for whom he has served as Secretary of Defense for 2 years until he resigned in December 2018. Here are a couple of paragraphs from his statement in The Atlantic from June 3, and he titled his protest, "In Union, There is Strength." Writes General James Mattis. I have watched this week's unfolding events angry and appalled. The words equal justice under law are carved in the pediment of the United States Supreme Court. This is precisely what protesters are rightly demanding. It is a wholesome and unifying demand, one that all of us should be able to get behind. We must not be distracted by a small number of lawbreakers. The protests are defined by tens of thousands of people of conscience who are insisting that we live up to our values as people and our values as a nation. We do not need to militarize our response to protests. We need to unite around a common purpose. And it starts by guaranteeing that all of us are equal before the law. Instructions given by the military departments to our troops before the Normandy invasion reminded soldiers that the Nazi slogan for destroying us was divide and conquer. Our American answer is, in union, there is strength. We must summon that unity to surmount this crisis, confident that we are better than our politics. Donald Trump is the first president in my lifetime who does not try to unite the American people, does not even pretend to try. Instead, he tries to divide us. We are witnessing the consequences of 3 years of this deliberate effort. We can unite without him, drawing on the strengths inherent in our civil society. This will not be easy, as the past few days have shown, but we owe it to our fellow citizens, to past generations that bled to defend our promise, and to our children. We can come through this trying time stronger and with a renewed sense of purpose and respect for one another. The pandemic has shown us that it is not only our troops who are willing to offer the ultimate sacrifice for the safety of the community. Americans in hospitals, grocery stores, post offices, and elsewhere have put their lives on the line in order to serve the fellow citizens and their country. We know that we are better than the abuse of executive authority that we witnessed in Lafayette Square. We must reject and hold accountable those in office who would make a mockery of our Constitution. At the same time, we must remember Lincoln's better angels and listen to them as we work to unite. Only by adopting a new path, which means in truth, returning to the original path of our founding ideals, will we again be a country admired and respected at home and abroad. This from General James Mattis on June 3. And I'd like to introduce the song that we'll be listening to. It's one of the Beatles' most well-known songs, Let It Be, words and music by Paul McCartney. That song begins, as I suspect you know, with the words, "When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me." The trouble Paul McCartney was dealing with when he wrote and composed that song, Let It Be, in 1968, was the conflict and impending breakup of the Beatles and the overuse of substances. And the Mother Mary who comes to him, though it may feel like it may be the mother of Jesus, the mother of God, that Mary is actually his own mother, who was also named Mary, and who died when Paul was 14 years old, and who now appeared to him in a dream. In an interview from 2011, McCartney says, "I went to bed one night and had a kind of a restless night. But I had a dream where my mother, who had been dead at that point for about 10 years, came to me in the dream, and it was as if she could see that I was troubled, and she sort of said to me, she said, 'Let it be.' And I remember quite clearly her saying, 'Let it be, and it's gonna be okay, don't worry, let it be.' I woke up and I remembered the dream, and I thought, well, that's a great idea. And then I sat down and wrote the song using the feeling from that dream and of my mom coming to me in the dream." Now, of course, the song Let It Be is sung in relation to all kinds of trouble. The words Let It Be carrying, as it seems to me, a kind of a twofold vision. On the one hand, to be aware that there's certain things that you can't force, that you need to accept and let it be. But also the hope and the faith that if you don't despair and give up, there will be an answer. To me, the song has the flavor and feel of the Serenity Prayer written by the American theologian Reinhold Niebuhr, which reads, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Let it be as sung by the Gospel Touch Choir.
The choir is much better, but
when I find myself in troubled times, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. And in my hour of darkness, she is standing right in front of me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be.
The American Creed. It's a phrase and concept that was introduced to me by a ministerial colleague, the Reverend Dr. Forrest Church, in a little book he authored titled The American Creed, a Spiritual and Patriotic Primer. Forrest, who died of esophageal cancer in the fall of 2009 at the age of 61, was the son of Idaho Senator Frank Church, who some of you may remember put himself forward as a Democratic nominee for president in 1976 before withdrawing in favor of Jimmy Carter. And Forrest, who worked on his father's campaign, debated with himself whether to go into politics, as he was being invited to do, or whether to go into organized religion. He ultimately chose organized religion and served then for nearly 30 years as the senior minister of the All Souls Unitarian Church in New York City. During his life, Forrest was also our most prominent Unitarian Universalist theologian, the author of, or co-author of over 20 books. One of his best, in my judgment, is the little book I put forward, The American Creed. It was published in 2002 in the aftermath of the experience of 9/11, the All Souls Unitarian Church in New York City being very close to ground zero. What is it, Forrest asked, following that horror in his city? What is it that binds us together as a people? The answer he gave was embodied in what he called the American Creed. Now, it's somewhat ironical that a minister of a religious organization like ours, which prides itself on being non-creedal, should speak of the American Creed, but here is his argument for doing so. Creed, he says, sounds forbidding and ecclesiastical. The American Creed is neither, but it is monumental. Creeds, he says, have to be monumental, struck in metal, that when refined in the furnace of history and burnished by developing thought, can endure the trials of time. They have to be steadfast enough to redeem history itself, reawakening tired minds, rekindling passion in hearts grown weary. Creeds, Dr. Church says, are spiritual touchstones. They are finished in fire, yet cool to the touch when passed from hand to hand, one generation to the next. So, what is the American Creed? Writes Forrest Church, capturing the essence of the American experiment, the American Creed affirms those truths our founders held self-evident. Justice for all, because we are all created equal, and liberty for all, because we are all endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights. America's fidelity to this creed, Forrest says, is judged by history. Living up to it remains a constant challenge, but it invests our nation with spiritual purpose if we honor its precepts, a moral destiny. As indicated in this quote I just read, the spiritual and moral vision of America, our primary creed, as Forrest speaks of it, is succinctly summarized in the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. And another clear statement of it is found in Thomas Jefferson's first inaugural address delivered in 1801. The irony, of course, is that both these statements were penned by a man who was completely enmeshed in America's original sin of slavery, the stain of which we are currently so acutely aware of. And yet here's a second statement of the American Creed from a flawed human being, a man blind perhaps or unable, unwilling to live out an essential part of that creed. From Jefferson's first inaugural address. Equal and exact justice to all, of whatever state or persuasion, religious or political. Peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none. Freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom of person. These principles form, says Jefferson, the bright constellation which has gone before us and guided our steps through an age of revolution and reformation. The wisdom of our sages and the blood of our heroes have been devoted to their attainment. They should be, he says, the creed of our political faith, the text of civil instruction, the touchstone by which to try the services of those we trust. And should we wander from them in moments of error or alarm, let us hasten to retrace our steps and to regain the road which alone leads to peace, liberty, and safety. Now, when Forrest wrote the American Creed in 2002 following 9/11, we were at an inflection point in our country relating to whether we were a nation committed to a larger moral and spiritual vision beyond simple self-preservation and self-interest. Were we one among the nations, or did we have to be number one? As it seems to me and many others, we are failing to live up to that larger moral vision at an accelerating pace. And now it would seem we are at another inflection point in our nation, not now so much related to equality among the nations as opposed to national dominance, but now of equality and justice within our nation rather than racial dominance. English author G.K. Chesterton once said that America is the only nation in the world that is founded on a creed. Set forth, he said, with theological lucidity in the Declaration of Independence. America, he said, is a nation with the soul of a church, which is to say that at the center of our nation, there has been a moral idea and ideal that has constituted our nation's soul and which has been an inspiration for many other nations. And now again, in our time, there is a desperate, desperate struggle for the soul of our nation. What is the soul of our nation? Do we have a moral vision? Are we, as retired U.S. Marine Corps 4-star General John Allen put it a few weeks ago, are we at the beginning of the end of the American experiment? Or is this a time, through the ongoing protests coming from many quarters, is this a time in which we are being called back to our moral vision, to reaffirm our American creed, to deepen our understanding of it, and to fulfill as never before its mandate and its calling? Part of what is bringing this America soul struggle forward at this time is the vacuum of leadership at the top, and that we have a president who, from where I stand, has no feel for our nation's soul and who does not share the moral vision of the American creed, who to me, quite simply, is rendered incapable of having a moral vision because of personal psychological deficits, everything being self-referential. Sadly, dangerously, as is now abundantly clear, our president is not a normal person, lacking as he does the human faculty for empathy, leaving a vacuum in his soul that cannot be filled as desperately as he might try. And thus he is opportunistically willing to play to Christian nationalists who have a very different interpretation of the American creed, believing that Christianity should hold a privileged place in America's public square, and who have struck a bargain with Donald Trump in which they are willing to overlook his personal psychological deficits and moral shortcomings in order to obtain their ends. This willingness by Donald Trump to play to Christian nationalists out of personal psychological need was most nakedly on display on June the 1st, when the president crossed Lafayette Square from the White House to awkwardly hold up a Bible in front of St. John's Episcopal Church. Less than a month ago, on June 19th, Freedom Day, marches were held across the country commemorating the end of slavery and the Emancipation Proclamation. It was also on this day in 1964 that the Civil Rights Act was passed in Congress after a long battle in the Senate. 13 days later, President Lyndon Johnson signed the act into law, affirming as he did the American creed with the following words: "We believe all men are entitled to the blessings of liberty, yet millions are being deprived of those blessings because of the color of their skin. The reasons are deeply embedded in history and tradition and the nature of man. We can understand without rancor or hatred how this happened, but it cannot continue. Our Constitution forbids it, the principles of our freedom forbid it, morality forbids it, and now the law forbids it." As indicated in this 1964 Civil Rights Act, the reaffirmation of our American creed also involves a deepening of our understanding of what it means. And you may have noticed in that quotation from President Johnson, the lack of gender inclusive language, which speaks to another deepening of our understanding that was still to come. In regard to this deepening and enlarging of our understanding of the American creed, there are some poetic lines from the 19th century American poet James Russell Lowell that come to my mind when he says, "New occasions teach new duties. Time makes ancient good uncouth. They must upward still and onward who would keep abreast of truth." Time makes ancient good uncouth. New occasions teach new duties. We are currently struggling with this question in relation to the commemorative statues, whether to keep them in place or whether to remove them. To what extent do the shortcomings and blind spots of our forebears, as viewed by us in hindsight and with the passage of time, to what extent are the ideals and principles they brought forward overshadowed by their failure to more fully live them out? For the last couple of months, I have been receiving a daily blog news summary written by Heather Cox Richardson. She's an American historian and professor of history at Boston College, and I highly recommend her daily news summaries. If you're interested, let me know, and I'll send a link to you for her website. But I'm bringing her name forward today because I want to read a portion of her blog from July 4, a little over a week ago, which relates to this question of honoring the founders of our republic. Dr. Richardson writes, "On July 4, 1776, the Second Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence, declaring, 'We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.' For all the fact that the congressman got around the sticky little problem of Black and Indian slavery by defining men as white men, and for all that it never crossed their mind that women might also have rights, the Declaration of Independence was an astonishingly radical document. In a world that had been dominated by a small class of rich men for so long that most people simply accepted that they should forever be tied to their status at birth, a group of upstart legislators on the edge of a wilderness continent declared that no man was born better than any other. America, she says, was founded on the radical idea that all men are created equal." In this blog, Dr. Richardson goes on to indicate that we are now once again struggling with this founding principle of equality as, quote, "a few wealthy men seek to reshape America into a nation in which certain people are better than others." All men are created equal. The first principle of our Unitarian Universalist Association restates and enlarges this first self-evident principle of the American Creed by affirming and promoting the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And let me thus then conclude my sermon today with the following idea, namely, that the religious association of which we are a part is a quintessentially American religion. And this is because the principles, values, and ideals that we hold dear in our association of congregations are also core principles, values, and ideals of our American democracy. The triple values of religious liberty, religious toleration, and religious pluralism, as well as the beliefs and values of human dignity, equality, and justice for all. Among other values, principles, and ideals, the congregations of our association have covenanted to affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, the right of conscience and the use of democratic processes, and the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Both our Unitarian and Universalist forebears were at the forefront in bringing forward the core principles, values, and ideals that constitute our American experiment, our American dream, our American creed. And thus I would contend that we ought to be at the forefront again in this time when these core principles, values, and ideals of our American experiment are under threat and in peril. In our tradition, we have a saying, revelation is not sealed. That is to say, our understanding of truth is not final and fixed, but evolutionary, unfolding over time. Following this notion, we should be at the forefront in interpreting and reinterpreting the American creed for our time. In this regard, this past week, I received an email from Roger Anderson. You don't know him, but he's a member of the Quimper Unitarian Universalist congregation here in Port Townsend. And in this email that he sent me, he gives voice to his thoughts related to Independence Day. And I would like to conclude by reading what he sent me. Roger Anderson writes, "Dear friends, the 4th of July has long held a special place in my heart. I suspect the spectacle alone was enough to get my attention as a child. But soon I began to appreciate that something special had happened in 1776. The world really did start to change. On July 4 each year, we usually pause long enough to recall the familiar language that we are all created equal and have unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. White males like me usually have stopped there, complacent and self-righteous, proud to be Americans. But this year, all of us are challenged to figure out how to respond to overlapping crises that have disproportionately fallen on Americans of color: police killings, COVID-19 deaths, and unemployment. These effects have many causes, but a central factor is how our society is structured. The Declaration itself, Roger says, offers guidance on how to proceed. Among other self-evident truths, it notes that, quote, whenever any form of government becomes destructive of securing these unalienable rights, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and happiness. Roger Anderson continues and concludes, for nearly 250 years, we have been able to avoid abolishing our government. Instead, we restructure our flawed democracy to meet new understandings of how governments ought to relate to citizens. Awakened by nationwide calls for change, we now have both the opportunity and the duty to build on those uneven experiences. We must be willing to honor our founding principles by again reorganizing our governments at all levels to better ensure those fundamental rights. We are yet again called by Lincoln to dedicate ourselves to bringing to our country a new birth of freedom. Roger Anderson, amen, and so may it be. And Brian Kinney will now play Chopin's Prelude 10 in C minor.
Oh, first of all, I want to say thank you, Bruce. I was so moved by your sermon and your readings. Thank you. It's now the time in our service when we set an intention for the following week. I invite you now to set that intention and choose your word or words for the week ahead. If you feel called to, please put them in the chat and I will read them. Hope and fortitude. That's from Lisa Johnson. Inspired from Ed Woods. Thank you from Ted Johnsrud. Self-compassion and stability from Joey Witherspoon. Perseverance and justice. Grace. Endurance. Strength and union. Vision. Determination. Being helpful. And from Ted Johnsrud to Reverend Bode, thank you for your excellent sermon, much needed in these troubled times. From Edward and Kristen Laws, seek unification and recognition. And from Jill Claridge, honest confrontation. Ellen Newberg says persist. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your intentions. Please join now in singing our closing hymn, We'll Build a Land.
From mold, restoring ruin. peace like an ever-flowing stream.
It was good to be with you this morning, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but this is better than nothing. Our closing words are from Rabbi Tarfon from the 1st and 2nd centuries of our Common Era, and he's drawing here on the words of the prophet Micah. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now, walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. And now we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And all are invited to greet each other during a coffee hour. The link to join is in the chat with the password, appropriate, I see, the password being creed.